What is up, guys? Archon tonight, we're bringing you guys another YouTube video. In today's video, we're double checking some settings here. We're all good. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about World of Warcraft Shadowlands, the developer update from 2 days ago. I'm behind on the ball here, guys. There's a lot of things that are coming out. League of Legends has a new champion, and I want to do a video on that. Just I'm behind. I'm going to try to get caught up. But luckily, since this is archived, we have the ability to fast forward a bit, so we don't have to watch the whole 44 minutes. With that, let's go ahead and take a look here what
Hello,
they got for us.
everyone, and welcome to our Shadowlands live stream.
Just showing off case or whatnot for the game. This is alpha.
Alpha.
Okay, there we go.
Just about 3 months ago to this day, the alpha began, and we welcomed thousands of folks from around the world in to begin to share this great project that we've been working on really for the last couple of years. We've at this point journeyed through the 4 main zones of the Shadowlands, seen a glimpse of the Maw, experienced Covenant active abilities, and of course, seen Torghast.
I'm guessing that they're having audio issues. I apologize if that's not them and that's on my end. As you could hear, the microphone is cracking a little bit.
Our valiant alpha testers have completed over 800,000 quests in that time. Over 2,000 unique characters have finished Exile's Reach, our new player experience on the Alliance side.
So I'm not sure why he's bringing up Exile's Reach as an Alliance side thing, unless it's because he's trying to push the narrative that this expansion won't be Horde dominant like BFA was. That could be the only reason I can imagine why he'd be mentioning this. Because for those who don't know, Uldir was the first raid tier of BFA. And Mythic Progression basically required you to, well, didn't really require, but it made it a lot easier if you had Blood Elves because of their passive and their ability to silence or remove the mobs from the Zol fight, the fear mobs that would spawn from a character. And ever since then, the entire BFA expansion has pretty much been, I think, 1 to 4 on Horde side. So for every 1 Alliance, there's 4 Horde. And it's pretty imbalanced, I'm not going to lie. Definitely made War Mode feel pretty useless because every time you pop War Mode on, there would hardly be any Alliance nearby, but you'd get ganked by like 40 Horde, and it was like, okay, yep, we're done doing War Mode for a little while. I wonder if that's why he's making a mention of this.
And ventured off to join the Alliance and go to Kultiris. Over 62,000 Torghast runs have been undertaken on our alpha servers. And alas, just over 11,000 of those ended in the clutches of the Tower Group.
So 1 out of 6.
And crucially, over 64,000 in-game bug reports using our in-game reporting tool have been entered by alpha testers.
That's a lot of bug reports. That's 2,000 more bug reports than there are runs in Torghast. I wonder if how many of these bugs, though, are duplicate reports for the same issue.
Our QA team internally is busy poring over those. So far, I think they've cataloged something like 1,600 unique bugs that are being tracked in our system.
Only a sixth of them,
reports,
basically.
Which will be fixed, of course, by the time Shadowlands comes out. And we know that's just the tip of the iceberg. This is really, an invaluable tool.
Probably more like 1 in 5.
Every bit of your feedback matters. Speaking of feedback, it's not just the feedback within the tool, but also broader discussions on the forums and the community at large.
So again, the reason he's bringing up the forums is because BFA, they had the beta forums, and they went ahead and they removed the beta forums, pretty much ignoring all the feedback. A lot of people said they didn't like the Azerite traits and the Azerite gear going into BFA. But at that time, I think the system was so entwined into the expansion that they didn't really have a fallback contingency plan for if people didn't like it. So they just tried to silence everybody and get rid of all the feedback. I'm guessing this is kind of their way of apologizing for that back in the alpha/beta for BFA.
Places like Reddit and Twitter and the videos folks are making to share reactions, thoughts, and ways in which the experience that they're seeing could be improved. Something that our entire development team is eagerly attentive to. Now, our alpha experience and our alpha process really is a true alpha. For the past weeks, what you have been seeing is the active organic evolution of the game.
Let's go ahead and skip to the next portion, shall we? So we have the luxury of skipping around here. Good beta.
Our beta. So what does beta mean? For us, beta certainly means the game's not done, but the framework is there and is complete. There shouldn't be missing pieces, giant missing ones where there's an entire feature that's not there, or there's a zone that's not yet playable. While those things are true, we continue to call it alpha. But we're getting very close
So pretty much what he's trying to say is that everything's in the game. Obviously, you have all your covenants, you have every feature Torghast. The only thing they got to fix is like some in-game bugs and some textures maybe here and there. That's usually how I consider beta at this stage. Like everything storyline wise for the first big patch is there. You're going to be able to experience everything on the beta.
Close to, pretty much the framework all being intact, being present. And so the level cap is going to go up to 60 when beta begins. It's also going to mean a first look at our endgame systems, at truly joining a covenant.
Wow, so in the alpha you couldn't go to 60? That's interesting. I didn't realize that. I thought it was you started at 60, but I guess you were stuck at 50. That means you couldn't use or couldn't experience any of the end game content, which we're talking about here. So you probably couldn't get the quest to go see the Covenant and all that.
Visiting your Covenant Sanctum, playing through that content, playing through our outdoor world max level content, our max level dungeons, our raids, experiencing Soulbinds, and more. And there's a lot of work still to be done to flesh out the details of these systems, but everything should be there, and that's why we are now calling it beta. Now, perhaps most importantly for many of you, this also means a big new invite wave going out.
I got
It's
my
going to start next week,
account
and that
set up for
process
beta.
will continue as we also want to, maintain a lot of concurrency on our test servers so we can get.
If you guys aren't sure how to sign up for the beta, let me know down below, and I will make a video on how to get into the beta or get signed up for the beta. That way you guys have a shot at getting in as well.
Feedback on what zones feel like when there are dozens or hundreds of people in there competing over spawns, trying to do quests together. So make sure to go to our Battle.net account options, check your settings there, make sure that you're opted in to Warcraft beta if that interests you, and be patient. Don't get frustrated if you don't get an email from us right away. We will continue to do invites over the course of the summer. And as John said, of course, this kicks off next week. So I want to take the rest of our time together just to talk a bit about some of the things that you're going to be seeing as part of that endgame loop. Some of this is stuff that we haven't really had a chance to say.
So one thing I want to touch on while we're talking about the beta here, if you guys recall, I was doing videos talking about the different specs back in the alpha. I think I only got through 2 classes, the DK and the Mage. I had worked on the Monk. I think I'd gotten through Brewmaster and Mistweaver, but I hadn't uploaded those videos. So I think what I'm going to do instead is the other classes. We will go back and revisit the DK and the Mage at a later time, right before the game goes live. I think that's the best time to do it, so you can compare and contrast. But what we'll do in the beta is if I can get in, I will do a more in-depth video with those. Because it does suck using Wowhead and not having any actual, experience with the beta or the alpha at the time to make my judgments on everything. And it was all kind of theory crafting whether or not what would be good here and what would be good there based on like numbers and talents and all the changes. I think it'll give you guys a little bit more substance as well to watch instead of just looking at a Wowhead panel, with talents and whatnot. So I'm going to put this series on pause for a bit. We'll come back and we'll do the Monk, and then we'll work our way through the rest of the classes in the beta, hopefully.
Much about since BlizzCon, and so I wanted to just share some more details and how the designs have evolved since we last discussed them. So first off, covenants. As we have said at great length, covenants are the centerpiece of Shadowlands, the Shadowlands expansion. This is where all roads lead. As you journey through the zones of the Shadowlands, you will play through all 4 zones. You will meet the 4 controlling powers of the Shadowlands. You get a chance to borrow their powers, get a sense of their personalities.
So again, more power, but I think it's going to be a little less than what BFA was.
Their ethos, their aesthetic. And at the end of that road, when you hit level 60, what awaits you is this fateful choice as you return to Oribos, now fully understanding the stakes that are affecting the Shadowlands and really all of existence, and choose whether you want to cast your lot with the Kyrian of Bastion, the Venthyr of Revendreth, the Necrolords of Maldraxxus, or the Night Fae of Ardenweald. And as you make that choice, what that means is unlocking an entire sphere of gameplay and content for you. What we've seen so far, and
so I wonder if we're going to get like an allied race from each of these zones. And you're going to be able to, kind of like the pandas, pick and choose which side you want to be on, whether it's Alliance or Horde. I could see that being a thing.
Alpha really is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just these couple of active abilities that you get to experience while leveling up, We also made sure to make those testable as early as possible just to get mechanical feedback on them and what felt good and what didn't. But now it's time to see the rest of the iceberg and everything the covenants entail. So on the system side, first off, one of the most prominent immediate things you're going to experience is Soulbinds. So soulbinding is this ancient ritual in the Shadowlands whereby two souls can link themselves to each other, sharing a portion of their identity, of their memories, and also of their powers. And so as you join a covenant, you'll be able to form soulbinds with certain key powerful souls that are affiliated with that covenant.
So it kind of looks
These
like
will
the
be
old
characters
talent tree
with vibrant,
system.
memorable personalities, many of which you will have met while leveling up and while questing through those zones. So here, I'm going to use the Venthyr and Revendreth for a lot of these upcoming examples because that's the first covenant that we're going to have playable in an upcoming build. Nadia, the Mistblade, she was a renowned duelist in life, and that persona really shapes all of her abilities and the ways in which she's going to enhance your combat ability, grant you utility, and more. And so what each soulbind represents, as you can see in this slide, it's effectively a talent tree.
Yeah,
You can,
like I said.
you will traverse down as you gain power in your covenant. You can pick which path you want to go down, customize your gameplay, customize those abilities to suit your gameplay. Now you may be noticing the empty slots in this tree. That's where you're going to put these items that are called conduits. Now, for those who played Legion, you may remember relics that you put into your artifact weapon.
Oh boy. Okay. So that means that the loot tables for bosses is going to be quite cluttered. From what I remember in Legion, you could either get an artifact or you'd get a weapon or armor piece or whatever. You couldn't get both at the same time. So that means that it's going to be cluttered again. So you're going to have like 9 different things, or not 9, but you're going to have like a lot of different things to potentially drop from the table.
These are fairly similar. Conduits are going to be items that you can get from dungeon bosses, raids, PvP, a wide array of max level item sources. And unlike the soulbind traits, which are universal, where an arms warrior and a holy priest have the same traits if you have Nagia as your soulbind, conduits are spec specific. They will do things like improve your ignore pain or your rejuvenation or whatever you choose to slot.
Well, that's pretty cool. At least from what I remember in Legion, I thought they were just stat buffs. They just increased your weapon and the item level of your weapon. Whereas now they're actually going to have a function. So I'm trying to think. It kind of reminds me of corruptions in a way. Because if they each do individual effects, then I'm sure there's going to be some that are obviously going to be better than others, and you're going to be constantly farming for them. And I'm really hoping that the best in slot isn't in, or sorry, not PvE, PvP for like PvE players. That's the one thing I don't like about World. Like I don't like about the current system is conflict and strife, and what's blood of the enemy. Both of those essences right now in BFA are best in slot for a lot of classes, or they're really good for a lot of classes, but they're only acquired in PvP, and personally I just don't enjoy the PvP in the game. I'd rather do PvE content and still have access to that stuff. If you want to give like both sides the ability to access these things, the same, conduits, then that's one way of going about it I think that you should consider. Don't force people to play the other side of the game that they don't want to play.
There are different conduit types. Some are going to focus on increasing your throughput, like your damage and healing. Others are more about survival. Others are about utility. Again, this is letting you mix and match to choose the gameplay and the loadout that really best suits whatever you're looking to do on a given evening in World of Warcraft. Now, unlike Covenants, which themselves are a very weighty choice and not something that's lightly switched, Soulbinds have a great deal of flexibility, both in terms of respeccing them at a nominal cost, nothing escalating like how Azerite was in Battle for Azeroth, or just switching from one soulbind to another, the same way you might respec or switch talents. Truly, the idea here is to have a range of options, and you pick what suits you for what you're looking to do right now. Now, as you join the Sanctum, as you join the Covenant, a key way in which you're going to progress within your Covenant is by gaining Renown. Renown will deepen your connection with your soulbinds. It will also unlock a wide range of features, rewards, followers, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
But quickly reiterate back on what he was talking about a minute ago. Sorry guys, eating some breakfast. I'm making me. But anyway, he was talking about the Azerite traits and how punishing it felt that you couldn't just swap on the fly. How they had that system where it would double each time you tried to change your Azerite traits out if you swap specs. So basically, he was saying that the Covenant or the conduits will be a little less punishing than what the Azerite armor was for BFA. So you're going to be able to swap them out whenever you want, which I think is good. Giving players more choices is better than taking away players' choices or punishing them for having to make a different choice based on the current situation that they're doing. So they are learning. They are learning from BFA, and that's very good.
Cosmetics and more. You'll earn renown by, on a weekly basis, going out into the world, gathering Anima, this precious lifeblood of the Shadowlands that every Covenant is starving for, or by going into the Maw and rescuing tormented souls that really rightfully belonged in your Covenant, in your realm, but that were instead cast into the Maw because of how the Machine of Death is broken. This isn't an open-ended grind. This isn't like artifact power. This is a more metered progression as you're working on behalf of your Covenant.
So time getting
making sure that really from the start, the moment Shadowlands launches, we have robust catch-up systems built in, whether you are an alt, someone who's switched Covenants, or someone who's just late coming to the game.
So that is a big deal. So now we're going to be able to play alts, and it's not going to feel as punishing. Right now in BFA, it's really hard to play alts. They kind of added a catch-up mechanic in the Echoes of Nyalotha. It does help a bit, but you're kind of capped outside of doing Mythic Plus or PvP arenas and whatnot, and how much you can get a week. Realistically, you're probably going to get like a couple thousand just to catch back up on an alt. But at the same time, it does feel kind of grindy and tedious. And not to mention the fact that you still need artifact power in order to get your neck piece up, which they did help with that a bit. It is easy to get your artifact power up on an alt. Then you also have to have the Azerite armor. And that they still haven't added a complete fix to that, because the only way to get Titan Residuum is through the weekly chests. There really is no other way. I guess you can scrap mythic versions of items if you happen to get them in a mythic run. What is it? I think mythic is 415 right now, or 430 for the current patch. But if you were to scrap that, you get like 40 residuum. It's going to take you forever to get to a good decent piece of residuum, or a decent piece of Azerite gear. Sorry. So it is good to see that they are at least thinking about alts and people who are late to the expansion, who may be even coming back from a long break from a while, so that way they can hop back in and experience the expansion and get caught back up with their friends pretty fast.
We don't want you to feel like you're behind or like you have some catch-up calendar, but Renown is a primary way in which you will progress through the systems of the Covenant, including Soulbinds, but also some stuff I'm about to talk about next. So each Covenant has a Sanctum. Now these are, there's loose inspiration is drawn here from things like the garrisons back in Warlords or the class halls in Legion. Each Sanctum is the base of operations for that Covenant, and this is a place where you're actually likely to begin and end most of your gameplay sessions once you're at max level. Each Sanctum has a number of features to it that you can upgrade, but really restore to functionality. Because I think what we're going to learn as we venture through the Shadowlands is that this was a vibrant place that had its own ecosystem and politics and people with various pastimes, but all this has been thrown into disarray as a drought plagues the land, everything is withering, starved of anima, and chaos really is consuming the Shadowlands. And you, as a champion of your Covenant, will be working to restore that order, to restore things to how they once were. And that will be largely accomplished by getting anima, rescuing souls from the Maw, and restoring, activating these structures. One of them that every Covenant has is a transportation network. So within your own zone, if you're a member of the Night Fae, within Ardenweald, there's a complex route network that lets you quickly access different parts of the zone. The Venthyr and Revendreth have a network of blood mirrors that can basically teleport you around. We want to make it so that, particularly if this is something you're investing in, you feel most at home, most comfortable in your zone if you're a member of that given Covenant, because that is where your powers are greatest, that is where your Covenant's influence is greatest.
Cool. They should get something else for making the Covenant instead of just an ability.
Something called an Anima Conductor. So as I've mentioned, part of the plight of the Shadowlands is this lack of anima. Groves in Ardenweald that were once flourishing with magical energy are now desiccated, withered. Temples in Bastion lie dormant, deactivated. The constructs that once guarded them are inactive. And anima is the answer to all of those things. And so what you're doing as you bring it back to your covenant, into your sanctum, is pooling it in a reservoir, but you also have the ability to direct the flow of anima outward toward your zone to regrow, reactivate these dormant parts of the space. Now, what that means in gameplay terms is you can send a stream of anima over to an area, which will enable quests, treasures, events, outdoor world content in that area for you based on your choice on a given day. As you upgrade your Anima Conductor, you'll have more options that you can unlock. And as you engage in the system in general, you can progress towards permanently enabling and reactivating these spaces, both so that you have the content available for you, but also so that you see the world change around you to an extent.
Basically, you're going to get to pick and choose where you want to do world quests at initially, and then it eventually opens up to being everything open all at once. But you got to slowly work your way there. I think that's a pretty good idea. I mean, it's kind of what they do already with BFA and what they did in Legion with where you were able to choose which starting zone you wanted to go to. But this is more for the end game where you get to, I guess, like I said, what it sounds like you get to open up your world quests, different spots. It's not going to be the same for everybody. I think that's pretty cool. I like how he, like you said, it feels like the world is changing around you. You're actually having an influence on the world. We haven't really had that too much. We've had choices of where we wanted to start, but we haven't had the ability to, have that impact on the world. Everything's kind of static.
This grove that once was withered and dead in Ardenweald will once again be blooming and flourishing with anima energy thanks to your efforts. And the events that were there will now always be up for you as a result of what you've done. The third system that every Covenant has is a scouting map. This is an extension of the mission system that we first introduced back in Warlords of Draenor, and we've kind of tinkered with that formula a couple times since then. And I think the basic loop there, we've moved away from its central importance that it had in Warlords, and I think we're not looking to go back to the Warlords era version of this being a source or the best raid gear in the game or what have you. But it's an outlet for some storytelling, some offline progression. So you have something waiting for you where you log in.
So mission tables are back. They're going to be used, I guess, from what sounds like to kind of tell stories, I guess, instead of just being what they were in BFA and Legion, where they were just resource grabs.
And something that you can maybe check in on in shorter sessions. But we want to add more depth to the system than what we've had in the last couple of expansions. What we have previously really is just, it boils down to a coin flip. You're doing a simple matching game, matching counters to threats, and maybe you get up to 170% success.
That's pretty cool. If you look at the icons there, you have a tank, you have a DPS, you have a healer. You're actually going to have to pay attention to your team comp and what order you place things is what it's looking like. That's pretty interesting. I like how they're expanding upon this a bit. I'm hoping it doesn't become ridiculously tedious, but at the same time, I do like that they are going in a different direction with it. Like you said before, they're not forcing you to do this. It's just something that you're going to be able to do, and from what it sounds like, it's going to be like extra stories. There's going to be obviously rewards for doing it, so if you do it, you're going to get rewarded for it. But at the same time, it's not going to be required to do endgame content like it was in Warlords.
Best chance to get your bonus reward, and hope you get lucky. And really, if you didn't, there's nothing you could have done better. Nothing you did right or wrong, and you either succeed or fail. We want to re-envision the foundations of that system to be something that is a better analog to the fantasy that we're trying to convey. The way a mission works in Warcraft isn't a coin flip. The way combat works in Warcraft, when you're sending these champions out into a dangerous area, isn't success or failure. It's nuanced gameplay with tanks and healers and melee DPS and range DPS as a party of combatants fight a bunch of enemies. And so this is an abstracted form of that type of combat. It still will happen while you're offline, but there's a turn-based system here where you will level up your Soulbinds, recruit additional champions and adventurers to bolster their ranks, and send troops custom based on your covenant out to complete these missions and obviously bring back some of that sweet loot that you're looking for. There's a lot of depth to the system. We're going to have a early peek at it in our next couple of builds, and we'll continue to add more breadth to it over the course of the beta. Really curious to hear initial hands-on impressions, and as always with all of our features, we want to jump in and react quickly to whatever feedback we hear. As before, adventures will also be supported in our mobile companion app, which will be updated for Shadowlands at the time of the expansion's release.
So that's what they're pushing. So they want people to be able to access and play World of Warcraft pretty much wherever they are at. Like I said, I think I'm curious about. You said it was a turn-based system. I'm wondering how do the turns work? Is it based on time? Does your guy attack, like let's say every 20 minutes, like it'll flip between your guy and their guy or something until one of them's dead? And if you happen to pick the correct comp or the correct order, does that mean that you just you'll finish the mission a lot faster based on the turn order, or how does that work? I wish you would have kind of went more in depth on the whole how it works system instead of just kind of playing over it. But like I said, if we get in the beta, we can take a look at it ourselves.
Now, those three features that I just talked about are something that every covenant has access to. They are universal. But each covenant also has a fourth structure that is unique depending on which covenant you've joined. Now, I've been using the Venthyr a lot for as these examples, so let's start with them. If you are a Venthyr in Revendreth, you also have this fourth section of your sanctum known as the Ember Court. Now, what the Ember Court is, it's a hosting venue for pretty rad parties. If the culture of Revendreth, certainly before things really went off the rails in the events leading up to this expansion, was one of elegance, aristocracy, a lot of those tropes surrounding nobility. And part of what that means is showing off your influence by hosting grand galas for the most important individuals, not just from Revendreth, but from across the Shadowlands as a whole. And the Venthyr were notorious for this. Now, your ally, as you join the Venthyr, Prince Renethal, is looking to reestablish himself, to reestablish a new order, and showing off his growing influence and stature in that area. And you're going to help him out as a loyal member of his covenant. And the way that's going to play out is what's effectively, a self-contained minigame where you can go out, seek out guests, invite them to the party, not maybe literally arrange catering, but figure out the different services that are going to make those guests happy, play through the party in real time, maybe fending off party crashers that are trying to disrupt the festivities, and at the end of the day, maximizing the happiness of all your guests. And ideally, if they're happy, on the way out, they'll give you a token of their gratitude in the form of, well, sweet Warcraft loot.
Basically, you're a party
And
planner.
to be clear, this is not gloom and doom, life or death, saving the Shadowlands stuff. This is just a fun side activity that has a remarkable amount of depth to it, but is there to allow us to flesh out the culture and the personality and the identities of these covenants.
Basically, it helps you get a better understanding of what's going on with each of the different covenants, their thematic. Could you imagine though if you had to kick out 7 partygoers, otherwise the Shadowlands just ceased to be? That'd be pretty crazy endgame content, wouldn't it? Oh man, I only got 6 of them. Well, looks like the expansion's done. It's pretty cool. It sounds like a pretty cool feature. It's gonna give you more depth to, and it's gonna give you more story to each of the different covenants. And I'm all for things that increase, replayability of the expansion and keep interested and invested in what's going on. So it sounds like there's gonna be a lot of different things that it's gonna allow you to have an impact on the world around you. And that's pretty important for World of Warcraft. Like I said, BFA had really none of that, honestly. Even the world quest didn't really feel all that, impactful on the actual world.
Covenants of these areas. You're not going to defeat the jailer by throwing the most badass party in the Shadowlands, but that is part of what being a
Wait, we can't just invite the jailer, poison him at the party, and call it a day?
Venthyr is. Now, if on the other hand, you join the Kyrian in Bastion, their unique feature is called the Path of Ascension. Now, the Path of Ascension is driven by this unique soul mirror, whereby you can actually inhabit the consciousness of one of your Soulbinds. So you can play, let's say, as the aspirant Pelagos, with a unique set of abilities, and go through a series of trials.
Basically, you can play as an NPC.
Combat against the most powerful souls of the Shadowlands that you will also go out in your adventures across the world and recruit and capture and bring back to fight within the Path of Ascension. This is a self-contained, combat-heavy system that has a little bit of a boss rush feel to it. For those of you who are very old school, if you remember the Chartul event way back in Burning Crusade in Blades Edge Mountains, this is loosely inspired by that. It's the same kind of vibe, and this is available to members of the Kyrian. Now, if you joined the Necrolords of Maldraxxus, Necrolords are, and Maldraxxus is the source of the military might of the Shadowlands. This is a lot of the power that we saw manifested by the Scourge in the great floating necropolises like Naxxramas, and abominations like Patchwork and Ghouls and Geists, and the art of creating those creatures, the art of necromancy.
So one thing I would like to mention now, though, is that I'm really hoping that none of these events here reward you with any type of special gear that could, could basically one up the other factions. Because otherwise, what's going to happen is that one specific covenant is going to be picked no matter what, because it has the potential to give you gear from these little unique features. I'm hoping that each of these just, it's just something you can do in your spare time if you want to learn more about the covenant and, actually feel like you're a part of the world. That's what this needs to be, and I'm hoping, like I said, there's no big end game, or there's no rewards for doing it. Or no, game-breaking rewards that gives you, like, a super trinket or something.
Is most closely affiliated with Maldraxxus. And so the structure you have as a member of the Necrolords is called the Abomination Factory. And this is a system whereby you can, build, fleshwork creatures, essentially, whether it's an abomination or a ghoul or a geist, to be the perfect housing for a soul that's in need of a physical form. Now, these souls have quirks and unique personalities and interests and abilities. So as you meet them, figure out what the right form for them is, and create a body for them to house, you can then adventure with them, unlocking various perks ranging from utility, extra gathering bonuses, to some combat perks in the outdoor world. And again, as always, this is available to Necrolords only. And finally, if you're a member of the Night Fae of Ardenweald, Ardenweald contains in its innermost reaches a sacred grove known as the Queen's Conservatory. This is where powerful souls effectively germinate, rest, are infused with the surrounding energies of the forest, and are prepared for rebirth and return to the world of the living, because that is the essential function, one of the essential properties of Ardenweald. Now, the form that takes for you as a player, this is effectively a soul garden, and it is inspired and has some parallels to the farm back in Mists of Pandaria, where you are tending your own plots, you are expanding them, upgrading them, being able to, effectively fertilize them with different catalysts that are going to shape the consciousness of these souls as you nurture them back to life. So it's a bit more magical, but at the end of the day, its own branch of self-contained gameplay. And really, one of the core ideas behind this variety of features is to, reinforce the breadth of what Covenant choice is all about, and to make your experience slightly different from that of your peers as you journey through the Shadowlands, or when you're jumping on an alt and checking out a different Covenant, giving you a whole set of new fresh systems to explore and experience there. So we'll have a lot more to talk about with Sanctums. We'll have deep dive blogs on individual pieces of these over the course of the summer as beta progresses, but that's an overview of some of the new stuff that you're going to be seeing in Covenants as beta begins. Now, some other new content. We are going to have, coming up, our last dungeon that we have not yet revealed, a max level dungeon called the Theater of Pain. Theater of Pain is a dungeon in the center of Maldraxxus, and this is really, it's an epic arena, and the dungeon takes place during an important event. There's this regularly recurring battle royale, effectively, where all of the war houses of Maldraxxus send their greatest champions to fight it out, and to prove who is the strongest, who is the most powerful of all.
World of Warcraft Battle Royale.
That's a lot of what Maldraxxus is about. It's might makes right is the prevailing ethos there, and demonstrations of power and military might and cunning. Now, this has, there are particularly complex layers to what's going on right now, given the strife that's gripping the Shadowlands, that make these particular games perhaps the most important and the weightiest in recent memory. And you find yourself as an adventurer, as a party of adventurers, plunged into this conflict. And the way that's going to play out is as a very non-linear dungeon experience, as you choose which of the different factions you're going to engage with first, as you traverse the catacombs and the tunnels beneath the arena, ultimately culminating in a final encounter where we'll see if you, or the five of you, can emerge victorious as the ultimate champions of the Theater of Pain.
So, how does this? He said it takes place during a special time, which is like a battle royale. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and assume that the Theater of Pain can't be a mythic keystone then? Because if it's tied to a specific event, or like a world event that's happening within the world, that would mean that you can't access it at all times. Therefore, if it was a mythic keystone, you'd have to wait a while, and then you'd have to try to like farm or grab as many groups as you can to try to get through. I don't know. It sounds a lot like it's kind of reminding me a little bit of what is it, Vault, the raid that was in it was in Northrend. I can't think of what zone it was in. I'm drawing a blank right now, but it was at the PvP zone that you had to have control of in order to actually, access it. For some reason, I'm thinking Warsong Gulch, but that's not what it was. I can't think of what it was called right now off the top of my head. But anyway, that's kind of what this is reminding me of a little bit. I'm wondering if you go into the Battle Royale, are you just able to attack everybody? Like Horde and Alliance? Because that's what a Battle Royale would be, is just hitting everybody. Uh, or is it just, I don't know, like when you say Battle Royale, it brings to mind like, Call of Duty or, Fortnite where you're just fighting everybody all at the same time. It doesn't actually matter, nobody's on the same side outside of you, whoever's in a party together. Those are the only people that are on the same team. Anyway, let's keep watching.
And as with all things Maldraxxus, the prevailing decor here is super metal, so expect more of that as you enter this dungeon. Next up, we are going to be revisiting the outdoor space of the Maw. So this is really where it all began for us in the Shadowlands. We just saw a couple of weeks ago in Alpha that initial venture into the Maw, the domain of the jailer, as we went in from Icecrown Citadel, not knowing what was going to await us on the other side. What we found was a horrific array of forces that we can't hope to overcome. We just barely escaped from the jailer's clutches and made it out into Oribos. We could then explore the rest of the Shadowlands. Well, now, as we hit level 60, as we are max level, with the power of a covenant behind us, it's going to be time for us to return to this place where it all began, to go into the Maw with the goal of investigating, exploring, trying to understand more of what the jailer is up to and how we might thwart those plans. So fortunately, early on in our visits into the Maw, we're going to encounter probably the one singular being in all of the Maw who doesn't actively want to kill us, at least as far as we can tell, this mysterious broker known as Venari. Venari is kind of huddled away in a small cave in the outer reaches of the Maw, and you will be able to work with her to investigate and explore, gather precious artifacts and resources from throughout the Maw that will maybe make it a little bit more of a hospitable place for you, give you more information, increase your ability to traverse the Maw, as well as improve your effectiveness in Torghast. The Maw is really inspired by a lot of our more sandboxy endgame content in the past. Most recently, probably Mechagon from the Rise of Ashara patch that we had in the middle of Battle for Azeroth. But those roots go all the way back to places like Timeless Isle. This isn't a place where you're going to bring up your map and see a bunch of world quests and clear direction. It's more about a loose structure, general broad objectives, and then lots and lots of discoverable gameplay. So we can't wait.
Wait, wasn't the Veil of the Timeless Isle the exact opposite of that? Wasn't it actually a world quest? It's been a long time, obviously, since Pandaria was a thing, and I haven't been to the Timeless Isle since, but I do remember there being a bunch of world quests, right? Or not, maybe they weren't world quests, maybe they were just daily quests that you could do. And there were places you could explore, and there was definitely a lot of things that were difficult to take down, sorry. Maybe that's what he's referring to. All I know is I can't wait to, get to the end here and see what the Maw actually looks like and actually experience it and play it for myself.
To have people jump in here, let us know what you think. And one of the really fun challenges in creating this experience was trying to create gameplay that reflects the fantasy of the space. You are not welcome here. This is not a place full of flight paths and inns to set your Hearthstone and people who are welcoming you at every turn. Everything in the Maw rejects your very existence and presence there. You do not belong here. And everything you do is under the watchful eye of the jailer, where if you raise a bit too much of a ruckus, you are engaging in you're making a bit too much noise, fighting too many big champions, calling the attention of the jailer upon you, you're going to need to beat a hasty retreat if you want to get out there and if you want to escape with your life and your hard-won earnings intact. So I'd like to share with you a quick video.
Wow, so he basically worded it whereas if you die out there in the Maw, you don't get to keep anything that you get. What it sounds like. Either that or it's kind of like it just automatically kicks you out. I'm trying to think of what was the place. There's a place that's similar sounding where if you draw too much attention to yourself, it just removes you from it. I think it was something in BFA, right? Oh well, whatever. Let's just take a look at the video he wants to show.
it's just a look at what the maw is like in motion.
Looks amazing. He looked like he was decked out in Lich King armor.
All right, so yeah, it's like a super desolate place, but awe-inspiring in a terrible way. So those are some of the specifics that we've just covered. I also want to lay out a bit more of what lies ahead as beta unfolds across the summer. Later this month, we'll be kicking off formal raid testing of our Castle Nathria raid. This is a 10-boss raid in the zone of Revendreth, where you're ultimately going to face off against the Venthyr Lord Denathrius, who is one of the major power players in the Shadowlands. It's just incredible Gothic fantasy. Our encounter team and our dungeon art team had a blast making this. We can't wait to get people in there. As always, we'll have focused testing windows for normal, heroic, mythic, and raid finder difficulties. And as we get on in the beta, we'll be looking to specifically have some targeted invites for experienced raiders who can give us the feedback that we need to get the tuning right on difficulties like Mythic. Also later this month, we'll be kicking off Shadowlands Mythic Keystone Dungeons. We want to get these in your hands as quickly as possible. As soon as max level content is unlocked, we want to enable Mythic Keystones. We'll probably have a vendor that just sells Keystones directly.
Wait a minute, why can't we have this in a normal game? Give me a vendor that sells me Mythic Keystones normally. That would be amazing. Could you imagine, like, at the start of BFA where you could destroy your Keystone and go to a vendor and just buy another one? Yeah, I don't want this Siege of Borealis anymore. Let me have this Freehold. That would be absolutely amazing. I'm wondering if they want to do this because of the level squish, maybe? And it... Oh, sorry about that, guys. But it affecting the scaling of all of your stats. And they want to get the scaling correct and the tuning correct on the Mythic Plus, as well as obviously the raid.
Just to facilitate testing. Early on, we just want to get initial feedback on how our dungeons are playing with the core Mythic Plus affixes, so we can hear quickly, where things like bolstering or necrotic or bursting are extra frustrating, and make sure that we're making any.
That bolstering? Did you say sanguine? Hold on, let me go back.
As soon as max level content is unlocked, we want to enable Mythic Keystones. We'll probably have a vendor that just sells Keystones directly, just to facilitate testing. Early on, we just want to get initial feedback on how our dungeons are playing with the core Mythic Plus affixes, so we can hear quickly, where things like bolstering or necrotic or bursting are extra frustrating.
He didn't say anything about sanguine. I mean, what? Sanguine is actually one of the more annoying ones, depending on how cramped your dungeon is. Like Wakerus Manor, sanguine can be pretty annoying to deal with. It's still doable, because you can just kite backwards and then kite the other way, if you need to. But it doesn't change the fact that it is one of those core affixes that's pretty annoying to deal with, depending on like the layout of your dungeon.
And make sure that we're making any tweaks early on to make the experience that you have ultimately when Shadowlands comes out the best one possible. Later on in beta, we'll also be revealing for focus testing our first Shadowlands seasonal.
I actually am curious about this. Did they not test the BFA dungeons? Because when I think back to like how the Mythic Plus system worked in BFA, like Shrine of the Storm, all the yellows, the little bloblets or whatever, they actually used to bolster, by the way. For those who don't know, those things used to burst, they used to bolster, they used to sanguine. It was pretty bad the first couple weeks of BFA with Mythic Plus because of little things like that. Toldagor, all the yellows used to do the same thing. Like all of the non-enemy enemies, or the neutral enemies in there, would just make those dungeons just hell to get through. So I'm kind of curious if they've learned from that. I would imagine they have to have learned from BFA, so I'm hoping that we don't have any new mistakes like that. I'm also hoping that the Keystones actually transition over to Shadowlands instead of like what we had where we were getting what was it, level 20 or 25 Freehold and 24 King's Rest, and it was giving us dungeons like King's Rest and Siege that weren't even available because they weren't unlocked yet through the quest chains. like the first week Keystones came out. It was pretty crazy, and then the Keystones also weren't functioning correctly. And what was happening is you'd complete a 2, and the key would reset to a 2, and then you would be confused, and then in your chest, if you kept doing that 2, you would actually multiply your key to like 48. Hopefully they've learned from that, and they can make sure Shadowlands, the Keystone transition is pretty flawless here from BFA to, obviously, like I said, Shadowlands.
Graphics, as well as some potential other tweaks to the system. Legendary rune crafting is something we're really excited to let people get their hands on. This is something we talked about way back at BlizzCon, and this is the expression of legendary items in Shadowlands. So for those of you who remember Legion, and really throughout the history of World of Warcraft, some of the coolest loot we've ever made has had that orange color, orange border. When you see a legendary item, it's usually something that's going to transform your gameplay and unlock an all new level of power within you. And one of the big points of feedback that we got that was frustrating in Legion was centered around how these items were obtained and
RNG
the
drops.
lack of control over obtaining them. There might be an item that was tremendously powerful, you'd seen videos featuring it, you were really excited to get it, but there was nothing you could do to earn it, you felt, unless you got lucky. Shadowlands is really aiming.
Well, yeah, he's not wrong. They didn't add a system until the very end of Legion. They would have added that system at the start of Legion, it wouldn't have been as bad, and it wouldn't have felt as bad. Me personally, in Legion, the first 2 legendaries I got were the class, well, they weren't class specific. They were the boots, Agrimar's Stride, and then the Ring of Sephu's Secret. And literally, they weren't great for Unholy. I was playing Unholy at the time, and for whatever reason, I think the first class specific one I got was Tovar's Wait Out Bindings, which I, for whatever reason, was in Frost spec, and I don't remember why I was in Frost, but I accidentally swapped to Frost and ended up getting the bindings and had to go Frost the rest of the expansion because those were the, like I said, best in slot for Frost, and it really didn't help that the Unholy DK got immediately nerfed with theirs with the 4th lesson.
From the outset to address those concerns and to give you a ton of agency and control over how you seek out and earn your legendaries. So early on, as you venture into Torghast, Tower of the Damned, you're going to encounter this mysterious runesmith who's chained up, shackled in a Hannibal Lecter-style cell in the bowels of Torghast. And what you'll learn pretty early on is that this runesmith wields some of the same power, that power of domination that was once used to craft incredible artifacts like Frostmourne or the now shattered helm of the Lich King. And by recovering essence from Torghast, as well as scraps of this ancient runic knowledge that you can bring back to the smith and awaken locked away memories, the runesmith will be able to make for you, to imbue an item with power that you get from a tailor, blacksmith, leatherworker, depending on your armor type. The runesmith can make a legendary of your choice for you. That way you can look at those amazing bracers or gloves or boots or whatever you're seeking and work towards it, earn it, and then begin your next project. A lot of these legendary powers are throwbacks to some fan favorites from across really the past dozen years, everything from.
So I'm going to go over the data mine as well that was talked about like a couple weeks ago. And we're going to look at the legendaries that were data mined. I think this pretty much confirms that a lot of those are going to game in some capacity. Maybe not the same power level that they were before, but the same concept will be there.
Legion legendaries to old set bonuses to powers that are brand new Torghast powers that you'll be able to use temporarily within Torghast, but sometimes permanently imbue a legendary item with. Because part of the idea is really this ancient runic art is the source of many of those powers, items from the Shadowlands that have found their way out into the world over the years. And finally,
Well, that's pretty cool. The tier set bonuses now have an explanation. They were all made by this guy, and they just kind of slipped through the Shadowlands into our world, into Azeroth.
Covenant campaigns. So I didn't touch on this when we were talking about covenants earlier, but each covenant, once you join them, has a max level narrative quest arc associated with it. This is similar to the war campaign that we had in Battle for Azeroth, where there was an alliance campaign and a horde campaign. This time around, there are 4 distinct campaigns of roughly that size and scope, depending on your covenant. And through playing through this, you will earn cosmetic rewards for your covenant, unlock an additional Soulbind, and really experience the full extent of your covenant's perspective on the world and the events of the Shadowlands. Also, before too long in beta, we want to kick off some focused PvP testing. We want to set up an environment where we can unlock all of these systems. We're not trying to test the progression and the rate at which you earn them here, but we want to just let you have access to Soulbinds, conduits, legendaries, all the rest, and get early and rapid iteration on arena, battlegrounds, just general PvP combat testing at max level, so that we can make sure that we're both reining in any outliers, but also just dialing in the overall pacing of combat. You know, no one likes those matches that go into super high dampening. The other end of the spectrum, no one wants matches that are over in 20 seconds.
Corruption.
Crazy burst or proc window. So the earlier we can get that
Infinite Stars.
The earlier, sooner we can start really dialing it into what it needs to be. As part of that also, it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, we do want to test the pacing of progression and rewards and the rate at which things are earned. And to make that as organic as possible, we'll be probably wiping the existing characters that people have had in the alpha environment, probably by the end of this month, and enabling character copies, which will set up end-to-end testing as you can come in with your characters from Battle for Azeroth, level up through Shadowlands, replace your gear organically, earn the rewards you're going to earn, and start giving us feedback on how all of that.
Basically, everybody who played the alpha, they're going to lose their characters, but they're going to be able to copy over their BFA characters instead. And you're going to play from 50 all the way up to 60. I think that's a pretty good way of doing it, rather than just having the alpha characters transfer over to the beta or whatnot. So this way, you're going to have all of your BFA gear on when you first come over. You're going to be able to see how the scaling works. If the BFA gear is enough to get you through, which it should be in most cases, unless obviously you're just starting the expansion and you just got 120. It is good to know that they are thinking about, BFA to Shadowlands and how that transition is going to be. Because I know sometimes when we start a new expansion, if, like I said, you're just hitting 120, you're going to get one shot by a lot of things because your gear isn't up to snuff. You're not at, Mythic 15 getting 470s. So I'm glad to see that they are testing the back end here.
Feels. So I think one of the things we've learned over the years in making these expansions is there's a whole lot that goes into them. There's a ton of moving parts, there's a ton of systems, and we can make our best guesses as to how players are going to interact with them. But there's no real substitute for having the whole thing stood up end to end and having people go through it. And rather than having those regrets that we sometimes have a month or two into an expansion where we realize that we missed the mark on some aspect of that progression, we want to really do as much of it as possible during beta so that when the game comes out for real, it's everything that it needs to be. And that's really the theme of the month ahead. We have some work to do to finish fleshing out the structures that we've just described, but most of the rest is going to be polish, responding to feedback, iteration, and finally, tuning. I'm going to talk a little bit about tuning because I know it's a hot topic. Balance is always, the most controversial, one of the most central topics in community discussion, and has been forever in WoW. Tuning is the last thing that we do. In the early parts of alpha and beta, we're basically just looking for extreme outliers where things might be so far out of whack that they disrupt the feedback that we get. If something is so overpowered that it trivializes content, well, we have to fix that. Otherwise, all of our feedback on, let's say, Torghast is going to be tainted because someone's walking through one-shotting things. Or if something is so weak that it doesn't matter if it's theoretically fun, it feels terrible to use, or no one wants to use it, we don't get.
Do you imagine? Somebody's like one-shotting things in Torghast. Torghast too easy. They turn up the difficulty for that one spec and then all of a sudden nobody can get through it.
Feedback on it, we need to fix that. But beyond that, we really want to focus first on shoring up the conceptual foundations of what we're building. We want to make sure that the abilities, the systems, and everything else feel fun, that they sound exciting as ideas. And then once we've gotten to a place where we're confident in those foundations, the natural next step is to dial them in so that they're well tuned. And so if you're looking at the way things are in alpha now and saying to yourself that, I don't know, hypothetically speaking, the best choices are 40% better than what you might pick if you were just trying to, go after what looks fun, that's because there's a key part of the process here that just hasn't happened yet. Now, I don't want to say, just wait until after beta, it's only beta. We sometimes get that wrong too, but there's a deliberate process that we approach for a reason. Because we want to make sure that we're using the majority of our bandwidth to fix bad ideas rather than potentially trying to polish something that ultimately is fundamentally flawed. So for example, we've heard a lot of feedback recently on
That's right.
the Ardenwield's Paladin ability, the Covenant ability, Blessing of Seasons. And we tried a couple different versions of that. Ultimately, we're at this point going to go back to the drawing board and fundamentally redesign the way that ability works, because it has some fundamental flaws that make it very challenging to balance, but also not even necessarily as fun as we'd hoped it would be. And so having put a lot of effort into tuning that would have potentially masked an underlying problem, or at best just been a distraction from the more important work that we could have been doing in the meantime. And so as the sort of original creative work of Shadowlands comes to a close, as we move out of that phase, the phase that lies ahead of us is going to have lots and lots of tuning and polish that will continue all the way up to the launch of the expansion later this year. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And I also want to thank you all for your patience. We'd originally planned on doing this stream a month ago, and back then we would have had somewhat different material. But we postponed it then to avoid distracting from a more important conversation. But of course, that conversation is still happening. Injustice doesn't cease just because we look away. Black Lives Mattered a month ago, Black Lives Matter today. And if that phrase is difficult to hear, know that I and others who speak those words aren't saying that your life has any less worth. We're only calling attention to the ways in which our societies seem to need a reminder that Black Lives Matter. Now, as John said earlier, these are extraordinarily difficult times. We all have our own struggles.
Sounds like he's tearing up a bit.
By simply listening with open hearts. So be kind to one another, stay safe, and we'll see you in Azeroth and in the Shadowlands beyond. Thank you.
So I gotta say, I'm pretty pumped for Shadowlands. It sounds like this time they're actually listening to feedback, which is very important. They're not trying to, hide all the feedback that they got originally, like they did in BFA, where they, like I said, completely deleted the forums. I'm pretty excited to see the Covenants. I'm glad to see that we're actually going to have an impact on the world. I'm hoping that it works like they intend it to, and we, can feel that story progression. That's what sucks right now, is that we don't impact the world. Like, our unique characters don't actually do anything. Everything is static. The story is going to transition no matter what we do. Our choices don't actually make a difference in the world around us. And for Shadowlands, it's not going to be like that. You're going to be able to open up, you're going to have a little control. You're going to be able to open up different, questing zones. Maybe your friend will do a different portion of, the Anima revival system, and then you'll go a different way, and it'll feel different, because you guys will have different world quests at that time. I'm sure there's going to be an optimal way for these world quests as well. I do think that there's going to be a cookie cutter way to, navigate through the world quest. Somebody's going to find it like day one in the beta. They're going to figure out, hey, these quests are easier, or, they take less time than this quest or this, zone. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to follow that one particular guide and try to get gear as fast as they can. That's always going to be a thing. But the option is there if you don't want to, if you want to have a different experience in the expansion than what your friend does, you at least have that luxury if you choose to go that way. I do think it's cool that they're adding, unique characteristics to each of the Covenants. They're not just going to be borrowed power that has no other meaning behind it like the Azerite system does. You're actually going to get to experience, the world through the Covenant's eyes, essentially. You're going to have parties with one Covenant. You're going to be able to create, bodies for lost souls in another Covenant. You're going to be able to, take care of souls for the reincarnation, kind of like you said, the Pandaria Garden. There's going to be a lot of uniqueness to this expansion, and I'm pretty excited for that. And it's also going to be alt-friendly, which is huge. They're going to allow you to catch up rather quickly, is what it sounds like. They're not going to, make you time-gated like what the Cloak was, where you were initially time-gated. So if you happen to miss a week on one of your alts, well, now you're behind. And now you can't catch back up until, they eventually release something that allows you to catch back up. A lot of the time gate systems for BFA were pretty annoying to deal with, I'm not going to lie. I'm hoping like Torghast isn't locked behind any type of time gate system, sorry. And you can just keep going in as much as you would like. I think that's cool. Like I said, I like that they're bringing back other legendary effects, and they actually have a backstory now where these items that we were getting throughout the other expansions that were super powerful tier sets were actually items from the Shadowlands that had slipped through. I think that's a cool way to explain all of these armors having special powers, all the Legion legendaries being a thing. Definitely like that they're trying to tie everything back in and have some rhyme or reason for why we have all these powerful items. Anyways, guys, that's probably going to do it for this video. Let me know down below, what do you guys think of the developer update? Are you guys excited for Shadowlands? Do you think it's going to be way better than BFA? Do you think it's going to be better than Legion even? Are you guys entered into the beta? And like I said before, let me know down below. If you guys have any trouble getting into the beta, I can make a video showcasing how to get into the beta or how to opt in. I'm also going to be doing a video talking about the leaked tier set / legendary effects that may be coming that were data mined as well. And we'll talk about and discuss what we're going to be going for first. Like, what I kind of have an idea of what legendaries I would like to get, or what effect I would like to get. I know you're probably going to be limited to probably 1 or 2, just like Legion, how it always is, so that way you're not like super broken powerful running through things. But we'll go ahead and discuss and break down and talk about the different legendaries. I think that'll be a fun thing to do. And like I said, if I happen to get into the beta, I'll probably do more class breakdowns like I did for the DK and the Mage. I don't want to do that right now with them getting ready to transition into beta, and who knows what else is changing between alpha and beta. Like you said, the framework's there for the story, but there's going to be other polishing changes that need to be made. Like they're completely reworking one of the Covenant abilities for Paladin. So with that out of the way, guys, hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you had fun. Let me know down below, like the video, and I will see you guys on the next video. Later.